did, and then there was, when he first got in, there was the £1 million climate fund. My borough is Waltham Forest, by the way. Yeah, so there was a £1 million climate fund. It was quite novel, newish thing happening in Waltham Forest last year, I think. And I kind of just consulted with them on it, and they were asking my opinions. How should we spend this money? How can we really make sure this money is used in the most effective way? And also, for me as a young person, how do I want this money to be spent? Like, what is my actual opinion? I don't know if my ideas even got implemented, but I texted the guy earlier today to kind of see how he's going with the role and how everything there is, just, you know, following up. So I think I will later. I'm going to follow up and ask him what they actually did with that £1 million climate fund. And, okay, that's enough talking about myself. Okay.
No, that's true. That was excellent. Thank you very much. Panelists, we've touched, so my next question for you, we've touched on in quite a lot of detail before, but I'll ask it nonetheless. And that's for those who are wishing to establish their own school, university or community environmental conservation projects. What support is available to them? I know, for example, that the Woodland Trust is very willing to donate trees at the moment towards tree planting initiatives. From an SHRG perspective, we also have business plans that are ready to be used by you guys to entitle local council to give you planning permission for those initiatives or to put aside an area of land. So if you are looking to run those types of events, please go on our website and contact me directly. But Lisa, obviously, being from Extinction Rebellion, you know, is there any specific projects within XR that, that these students could latch themselves onto and get involved in, as far as you're aware?
Well, you can come on April the 9th to Hyde Park to Speaker's Corner and march around with us. And the point of marching around, actually, so I didn't really make that connection earlier on. The point of activism, the point of getting in the way and disruption is to bring the problem that you're talking about to the attention of more people. Yeah, and I think Extinction Rebellion has been very successful in doing that. People haven't always liked it in the moment, but actually far more people now are aware of the issues facing this than not. And I think I'll answer not from Extinction Rebellion, but just from as myself, if that's okay. Yeah. I would say what support is available, probably not very much, but you need to think about what impact you, or I would suggest that you might want to think about what impact you can have in the organisations that you're involved with. So if you're thinking about school and university, so what impact can you have? Well, you know, we just can go through the big four really. Food, so some universities already moved to being completely meat-free, meat and dairy-free, so they've already gone vegan. I don't know what's the situation here. Are you at that point? No? That's a big thing, that could be something that you'd want to pick up and put pressure on the college to do. Because it sends such a strong message to the whole student body then. You know, if they understand why that is important. Another big thing perhaps to think about in terms of the organisation you belong to, a school or university, is to think about how it's financed. Where does it get its grants from? Who does it bank with? Yeah? You know, certain banks, Barclays and HSBC in particular in this country, are responsible for massive continuing investment in fossil fuels. They are not friends of, you know, of the climate emergency. They are the opposite of friends. So if organisations can move away from those banking institutions, if the place where pensions are invested, I've recently made sure that my pension is with an ethical investor that doesn't invest in fossil fuels. Yeah, that literally was me signing, but hopefully, if lots of people do that will actually have an impact. Yeah, because it will tell those organisations that they are not attractive to people who are prioritising the environment. There's quite a lot of money swishing around from government, or at least there was, and I think there will be again, for public sector buildings to decarbonise. And I'm sorry to be boring about form filling and grant applications, but there really is. Just before I left the school I was in, we had a grant from the government for £600,000, I think. Boring form filling, but it did it. And sometimes the most impactful things you can do, somebody mentioned about law earlier on, Serena, I think that was you know, thinking about lawyers. There's a fantastic organisation called Client Earth, which is lawyers who are taking governments and organisations around the world to court, pressing upon them the laws of those lands, because they're actually breaking the law in some instances in what they're doing to the climate and to the ecology. Well, that's a really, really good use of the law. So, that bit of a tangent, but in terms of what you can do, your attendance here is of critical importance to you. You know, it's how the universities exist. It's your £9,000 a year and the grants they get. So your voice matters and your collective voice matters. That's what I would say.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Lisa. Zach, could I ask you to?
Sure. So briefly, just a couple of weeks ago I was across the square at Birkbeck University because I was invited by a climate group there to come and talk to the students, because there's a coalition of students and staff, which is exciting that staff are involved too. And they've got some basic calls for Birkbeck to divest, to make sure there's no single-use plastic in the building. I'm pointing at that bottle at the moment. And also to make sure that the curriculum is telling the truth. And I think climate education is a huge, huge part of that too. I have to be honest, I'm sat here now, I don't know about UCL's record, and I'm not particularly trying to pull up UCL's record in this moment, but it might be something that people in this room might want to do and keep pushing the institution there within to move. Friends of the Earth are an obvious organisation that are doing lots of work across London and in various places, and they're always worth getting involved with. And you know, I wouldn't finish this answer without putting one more plea to join the Green Party. And I would say there is a very active Young Green movement in the Green Party, and actually I can say hand on heart that the Young Green movement is the beating heart of our party. And very often, I think, if you want to look at what the Green Party manifesto will be in 4 years' time or 5 years' time, then you can look at what the Young Greens are saying now, and that generation almost always is what's about to come. And I would say cheekily, but I do believe it, if you look at the Green Party manifesto, you'll probably see what's in the government's manifesto in 15, 20 years' time, or Labour's manifesto in about 10 years' time. The problem is we don't have time to keep waiting for these lapses between good ideas and implementation. We need the good ideas that young people are coming up with now, like a universal basic income. We'll go off on all the good ideas, but I just think the power of those good ideas are what we need to be putting into place now. And then finally, so before I was a politician, I was an actor. So I was making art and working on immersive theatre and political projects. And I'm under no illusion that, you know, at the moment we're in a local election campaign, so I visited nearly every borough in London in the past 2 weeks. So apart from being exhausting, it is energising because you go to all these different places in London, you meet these people and you see what's going on in the local area. But I'm under no illusion that when I knock on someone's door and I have a 3-4 minute conversation with them about both the planet, which is what the Green Party care about, and it's really important to say, and about social justice. So people often think the Green Party just care about the planet or just care about the environment. They're obviously very important to me and the party. And you can't have environmental justice without social, racial and economic justice too. And those things always need to be spoken about at the same time because they're intrinsically linked. But when I'm on the door and talking to people about those things, if someone's skeptical, I know that I can't really change their mind in 3 minutes. I might plant a seed, I might be able to create engagement, I might share my WhatsApp number, and we might have a future conversation, and things might change. But actually the real way to change people's minds, I think, is through art, it's through music, it's through telling stories. I think that's where XR is brilliant, it's storytelling and its visual impact of things. Now, I know not everyone in this room might be an artist or an actor and want to run off and go and do that. But it comes back to the first answer, which if you look at where you are good at or where your natural career is or where you are in your life, it's always good to think, how can I be kinder doing these things? How can I improve the planet doing these things? How can I create a better community doing those things? If we can put those things together, I think that's when we recognise our own power. And when we recognise how powerful we all are individually, you don't need to be elected to be powerful, everyone has that power. It's just very often people with privilege who take that power. And we've got to find ways in society for everyone to be able to own their power and own their voice.
Wonderful, thank you. Extremely thorough as always. Virginie, could I pass over to you now?
Yeah, just to share 3 additional tips or address or names. At UCL, there is a scheme for supporting sustainability initiatives. I know very little of it, but I know that the university would share resources for such projects. There is in London the Women's Environmental Network. That is a really good network, particularly if you care both about social justice, gender equality, and the environment. And they do support a lot of local conservation projects. So something to really look into. And then if you're really interested about international political process, the United Nations Framework for Prevention of Climate Change, or UNFCCC, has a youth constituency, and you're probably better place to talk about this, but you could join as a young person and be part of the network and be one of the representatives at the future COP. So that's also something to look into.
Excellent, wonderful. Serena, over to you.
Okay, just to answer the first part of the question about what support is available, this is something that I've had to really, really deep dive into as a young person who is trying to implement my own project as well. So I've actually just noted down a list, and there's so much. And I think the first one that I find the most exciting, the most interesting, is this enormous movement behind us. And it's everywhere. It's local, it's national, and it's also international. And this movement, I have seen with my own eyes, has so much talent in it, so much creativity, so much skill, and just taps into every corner that you can think of. And it's absolutely fascinating to see all of these young, talented people who are so passionate, and they are taking their skills and driving it forward to try and make change with it. Another form of support that is available is this kind of mentorship and training aspect. So I was just on a webinar today. Actually, it was through work, but it was training me on the UK's vision for green hydrogen and this kind of thing, and how this is going to impact the energy transition. But apart from that, there are webinars and trainings available everywhere. Every single day there will be some kind of live webinar, or if you don't want live, on YouTube, there's training courses on everything, on every kind of intersection with climate change and how to take action in that area. That's another thing. And so many mentorship programs as well, because I'm on many, many mailing lists after having done this for so many years. And there are constantly mentorship programs coming through where maybe they're going to even offer you funding at the end of this program, where they mentor you on a specific project and then help you actually implement it later on. Also, another form of support, of course, is the funding side. So literally just on one of my channels today, on one of my activism channels, I just saw floating around, this organisation wants to give us £40,000, can someone fill out the application? It just floats around. People want to give us their money to do projects and make good things happen. So I think there's a lot more funding available than it may seem. Actually, one example is, so for one of my biggest projects last year, which was the formal COP26 Youth Conference, or the 16th UN Climate Change Conference of Youth, as the long name, we managed to raise about £500,000, and this was from various sources. The biggest source was from the Scottish Government, which covered over half of that money. They were very, very kind to us. And it was an international conference, and the organisers and the youth delegates and all the speakers were international and young leaders from around the world. However, it can give some idea that there is so much money available, and your national government or even your local government wants to give it to you. But also not just them, also businesses, so many organisations, it's all there. Another thing is that mental and emotional side, because we might all be aware that there is so much eco-anxiety associated with making change in this area, and there is so much dread that can come alongside it as well when you just feel like this tiny dot, and the issue is so huge and it can just completely overwhelm you. But that kind of mental side, I feel like there are things in place that can help you deal with that. So one example for me, when I was at uni and I had this role the UN Climate Change has a youth network, as just mentioned, and it's called Youngo. And I think in my introduction it was also mentioned that I was leading this network, and it's about 10,000 people. I was leading it in 2019 when I was in my second year of uni, over second year and third year of uni. And it was so intense, and because not only was I doing coordination for thousands of young people to be involved with UN processes and also national processes. But at the same time, I was doing my own climate activism, my own advocacy with the UN, with different stakeholders, with business stakeholders and NGOs and all over the world. It was so intense that I kind of had low-key a mental breakdown, and it was hard, it was tough, but my uni understood, because they kind of understood just how much it was and how much weight I was carrying on my shoulders by throwing myself in the deep end of activism so much, and they were really, really hugely there for that mental and emotional support side. I feel like that went a bit deep and dark from this question of what support is available. So let's take it back light again. Also, things like qualifications, accreditations, if you want to add legitimacy and some kind of that level to your project. So with that COP26 youth conference that I was organising, we got official endorsement from 2 UN bodies, one being the UN Climate Change, and then one being the UN Youth Envoy's Office, and then the third one was from the COP26 presidency. And by having this kind of endorsement, this really increased legitimacy when it came to doing funding applications or recruiting speakers or anything like that, any of our promo. And just quickly, I'm just going to list some groups as well that I think my turn to plug. So my organisation, the UK Youth Climate Coalition, are actually recruiting, and so this is for 18 to 29-year-olds. This is how I have been going to COPs for the last 5 COPs, COP 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, and also a bunch of other UN meetings. So they give me my accreditation, but it's not just I take a badge. There's also, so there's about 5 or 6 different working groups. Each one focuses on a different form of activism. Some are focused on community and local level organising. My one is the one that goes to COP in the UN. There's also one that focuses on systemic change within the UK. The deadline is tomorrow night on Friday. Just Google UKYCC if you're interested. Another one is, so the UN Climate Change Youth Network, the one that I mentioned before. While they're not a local one, it is a network of about 10,000 young people, and there are so many people in London, and no doubt someone who's going to be near your local area who's probably looking to do something. Maybe not to this direct where we are now, near this uni, but like I was mentioning with that, I was speaking with my local councillor about the £1 million climate fund. Anyone can do that. That just came out from a casual chat and swapping WhatsApps, and anyone's local borough will have a local councillor who maybe has some money dedicated to climate and environmental change. A good friend of mine does clothes swaps in schools, and she's 19 years old, she's a bit younger than me, but she's been doing this since she was 15, which I think is really impressive for a 15-year-old. When I was 15, I was just, annoying. But so she goes around. We did a fashion show 2 weekends ago with secondhand clothing. That was really, really nice. And I find these more creative angles very, very interesting. But that's also London-based. Another friend of a friend does dedicated concerts and gigs dedicated to climate change. So maybe the singer or artist will be somehow related to climate activism. Or the money will then go to climate charities or anything like this. Also, again, it's not maybe specifically local, but a bit more national focused, but big media outlets like the BBC, and also dedicated climate ones like Climate Home News, which one of my friends reports for. There are so many of these that are looking for young reporters and young people who are out in doing frontline activism and this kind of thing to report directly for them. I feel like I was just talking for so long. Yeah, okay, I have a few more. I'm just going to leave it there.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that, and that very empowering story as well. I think this is probably a great opportunity for us to open up the floor to you guys, if you want to ask any questions that you have. In order to take the questions, I'll pass you over to Bethan.
Climate change? Okay.
Yes, who has questions? Yeah.
Hi, thank you for your talks, everyone. My question, I think the lady on the left, on the far end, the student, the working for the companies as well, said that if there's people from different parts of the world where they see the impact XYZ happening somewhere, something, then that needs to be given attention. And I've been on this circuit for quite a few years, raising the attention to what's happening. India is a huge country, and probably people know most of it is more famously for the farmers issue, because the farmers have been fighting not just against the incursion by the government, but it's primarily the government doing the billing of the big pharmaceuticals, the big farming companies, the big GMO companies. But my question is, to east of India, which is of mining, is a mining state of religious significance to me, because India's got lots of temples, gurudwaras, everything. When I researched this area a few years ago, I was shocked to my horror to find, because this was all about divestment from fossil fuels. I've been to a lot of the different things on divestment, and I was like, okay, this is going to be fossil fuels maybe. And when I looked at the geology, because the geology is going to show what's underneath the soil, or whatever you call it, the forest. And this is where the rub is. The minerals that are extracted from Jharkhand, East India, and also in Pakistan as well. It's a similar sort of area, because that's where the border was split between India and Pakistan, and all across India. And my friends tell me forests are being taken over by the government to do the mine, to do something. And I was like, I looked at it, and I was like, hold on a second. So I looked at the geology, and here is the rub. The resources that are being extracted by way of deforestation. And I'm not talking about Hyde Park, I'm talking about 20 times bigger than Hyde Park forest. Huge. The forests are gone, the water is gone, then obviously the temperature's going to go up, because you haven't got the water in the trees to sequate everything. The resources are gone, the women are abused, there's a lot of crazy stuff happens, right? When these resources are brought here, they're not turned into power plants. They're not turned into diesel cars. They are turned into solar panels, wind turbines, and electric cars. This is the rub. This is the green colonialism that a lot of the young people are not aware of. Maybe if they're in India or Africa, they're in the Congo, they're in some other place, they probably know it. But they haven't drawn the dots together. My question is, where is the real emergency? Is it for us screaming out there's an emergency when I can still get food and water in the UK? Or is the real emergency in those places where their land is being destroyed, not by fossil fuel companies? They're being destroyed and decimated, and the women are abused, and every other piece of crap that's going on is happening by our own volition to push forward this sustainable climate change plan. Why should my people in India give up their land for this? And I asked this question to the lawyers a few years ago. Which one of you environmental lawyers will help me take you to court for not talking about the truth that's happening, which is not for fossil fuels? If we're going to divest, let's divest from everything, and let's see how far we get in society. But why is no one asking about this? And look at the whole supply chain. Those resources, those solar panels are going to end up in Africa after 10 years. So where is the real emergency here? Because no one's talking about this. Everyone wants to talk about the cute, sexy little bit in the middle, which is somewhere in London. I know it's a long question, but this has to be said. If we're really going to do something sincere and in earnest, show me the full supply chain, which I can show you right now, all the way from A to Z, and you'll see these renewables are conflated and littered. It's harsh, it's littered in the blood of Africans, Indians, South Americans, Chinese. And just last thing, Serbian people successfully kicked out 2 environmental NGOs who wanted to go after the forest to get the lithium for the electric car. The Serbian people, not India and China, it's white people, they kicked them out. That says something. Same things happen in Edinburgh, up north in Scotland. These things are really coming up, and people are actually standing up. And this seems to be disjointed from the message which is in the mainstream. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. But there is real kickback against these renewables. Thank you. And how is it tenable in any way? I don't know.
Was that a question directed at one of the panelists specifically, or is it just general responses?
Question to anyone who wants to gamble to take it.
I don't know if
But this is a question that needs to be answered, for sure.
I'm happy to get
Jack,
it.
you
Unless
want
anyone
to.
wants to go first. So this is a very complicated question, but I think you're right. It's a question that's important to be asked. I think there's a few aspects to your question, and you're right, it was a long question, so I've identified 4 points. I'm just going to go for those 4 points first of all. I think the first question about, the general question about in tackling the climate emergency, do we need to make sure that we're protecting some of the most vulnerable people in our society? When I say society, I'm very often talking about London. I'm a London Assembly member. It's my job to advocate for Londoners. But aside from that, I'm absolutely talking about the global population and talking about countries like India. And to give you an example, I'm deeply concerned that within a couple of days of Russia invading Ukraine, Boris Johnson said, we need to have energy security. Let's go to Saudi Arabia. And as a gay man, I am not comfortable at all with the fact that we are going to do business, and we are doing business so commonly with a country that has such awful human rights abuses. So that's the first point. I think those things need to be consistently called out. And it is difficult for us to call out countries with human rights abuses when our government in this country hardly has a good track record on lots of social justice issues. But I do think there is a difference between how the UK government currently are treating people and looking at the Russian government, at Putin, and at Saudi Arabia. So I think we need to not fall into false equivalence too while still criticising Boris Johnson. Just let me finish. That's all right. Absolutely. I'm going to answer your question. That's just the first part. The second part is about very, very often, I'm sure everyone on this panel has probably had this experience. You talk about the fact that we need to decarbonise in this country, and people go, what about China? What about India? And my answer to that always is, I'm in this country, this government are accountable to me, we vote supposedly for this government, so actually that's where I'm going to focus a lot of my efforts. And I do think there's an inherent racism as well in blaming other countries, and that is to do with the history. Now, I said at the very beginning of this talk, and I felt as I said it, I thought that's not quite true, but I'll carry on going, that we don't want to talk about the history, we want to talk about what are the actions that we need to take now, and I do think that intention is true. And when we get into a conversation like this, we need to look at history. We need to look at the colonisation that happened in this country, the racism that's happened in this country, and the Industrial Revolution, and the fact that we have these historic emissions. This country have a global responsibility to focus on ourselves and not to blame other countries. So I think that's the second point. And then the third point, which I think gets to the nub of your question. Absolutely. If we are going to have a Green New Deal, and if we are going to have a better society that looks at greening our society, we absolutely need to look at where are the sources of those wind turbines. If we're putting people out of jobs, where are the jobs that they're going to? And this is work you say no one's doing, and I'm totally not offended that you're not aware of my work. But on the London Assembly, I've been pushing the mayor on this. So to give an example, in London right now, we need £61 billion to invest in our economy for a Green New Deal. And that money is going to come from private investment and public investment. Now, I've asked several times about that private investment, because right now a lot of it is coming from Bloomberg philanthropists. For those who don't know, Bloomberg, a very wealthy man in America who ran for president, not the worst person in the world, but certainly not someone I particularly want to take money from. Now, I've said to the mayor that I'm willing to be pragmatic, and that's someone where the sirens don't go off. I'm worried about it and I'm watching it, but it's not someone where I say, absolutely, we can't take that money. But where is that red line? Who will we take money from? Who are we willing to take investments from? And actually, where is there a point where we go, that money has come from a conflict zone, or that money has come from somewhere that is not ethical? And I think those questions do need to be asked. Now, the answer that someone from London Partners gave me, and London Partners are the corporate wing of the General London Authority, I'm sorry this question's getting quite nuanced, but it is a nuanced question. And he said to me that money is neutral. It doesn't come from anywhere, it's where we get it from, it's where we spend it from. And I was disgusted by that answer. And I took that to the Deputy Mayor for Business and said, do you agree with this corporate person that you employ that says money is neutral? And he gave me a very kind of weak answer that kind of went all over the place. I can't, I'd have to paraphrase it, I don't remember exactly. But I think the point's there, and this is why I'm agreeing with your question. I think there is a huge temptation here for the government certainly to greenwash and present us with shiny new things, and I think that 8 nuclear power stations is an exact example of that. That's not a good way to get us out of the crisis. That's a way to make sure that we're investing money in a technology that we don't necessarily know is safe, that it's going to take a long time to build, and also that it's had problems all over the place when we know that there's much easier options like onshore wind. So I think that none of these things are easy, but they're important, and we need to make sure we're having these conversations. And I think it's really important that we're not taking metal or material that has come from areas where people are being exploited or their human rights aren't being treated in the way that we would expect people to treat. And I think that's going to be an ongoing conversation. I'm sure mistakes will be made, and when they're made, they need to be called out and changed.
It's wind turbines that's stripping out the soil and the resources from India. It's not being
I think you can look at new technology though, so you're taking the principle of onshore wind or offshore wind and make sure that you're not abusing other people's spaces. And of course, you know, the biggest example here too is, as was said earlier, the worst effects of climate change are on small islands. They are on some of the countries that are least able to protect themselves. And we also have that responsibility to reduce our emissions. So there's a negotiation here, but human rights has to be
people in India are going to have to choose between, do they give up the water to be extracted for resource extraction for wind turbines, or do they keep the water for themselves so they can farm for food? That's what the situation in India is right now.
Maybe I can continue and try and address some of the point that you're making, because first of all, if we're not talking about degrowth, if we're not tackling the issue of renewable, it's also the way the event was framed, focusing on London, focusing on young people here. We could have an entire panel about India, and I know a little bit India because I've lived there. Women have been completely, excuse my language, fucked up and completely spoiled about their land for other industries, not just wind turbines. And it's been going on because of oil and gas industries primarily, but also water, creating dams. So many people in Asia have been completely abused, and their land is being taken off by the system, economic, political systems that are creating climate change. And so I just want to say that while I agree with you that technology is, especially the focus on new technology to get us out of this mess, is really not something I believe in, particularly when it's being produced by people who led us into this crisis. I do think there is a danger to put us against each other when we're trying to advocate for renewables. And there are different ways to have renewables. There are very small-scale projects, particularly when we focus on Africa and India, that don't necessarily require large-scale processing plants. A really small-scale hydro project, wind and power. And I can tell you a little bit about this later as well, because my partner work in the wind sector. And there's a lot to criticize the wind sector for, but there's at least something that is better, is that they don't emit carbon. So it's just to say that these conversations are difficult to be had, but we also shouldn't be distracted by what is at stake there, and what matters is both the environment and human rights.
Thank you very much for your question, and thank you very much, panelists, for your response. I do want to make sure that we do have enough time for everyone to ask a question. So can I open up the floor again and ask if any of you have anything you'd like to add or to ask?
First is a vote of thanks, especially for the organizers and for our great panelists. I can say I've learned a lot, and I felt better to continue to be an advocate and even move an activist and to talk louder whatever the attacks I get out there. Because I think fighting and being in the middle of my colleagues, it have made me feel warmer and better and to face the reality. Second is to say that for me, I come from Kenya, so I am here for a visit, and we missed the COP26, but I attended the UNEA 5 in Nairobi. So one thing I would say, whatever you're saying, it's a reality, especially us who are coming from the grassroots. I would like to say, whatever you are saying, it's something that we're experiencing, the reality on the ground because of the environmental impact, a lot of change, hunger, people going out of without food, and food becoming even a very expensive thing. And maybe this may not be published out there, but it's a reality because you find community that were producing food like maize, which are more of like a typical food from the grassroots, wheat, have become affected by something we call climate change. So we are becoming, and sorry to say, whoever is out there talking about this, continue putting the mic louder, because we'll become like more dependent. Countries that were producing something to eat, other than even getting food and borrowing money, we'll be borrowing money out here and borrowing food, which is not good. So the other thing I would like to say, a country that was producing something like cotton to sell or even other horticultures, we are now looking for countries to provide us. So why is it something basic like cotton dying in the market? It's just because of climate change. So when you talk about science and climate change, I really appreciate, because something like now cotton, the seeds that you are using before to plant cannot grow now because of the climate change. It requires scientific research to be reproduced. So for me, I'm feeling home and I'm looking for this event. It's only because of time, but I'm looking for another event on this, because even my colleague, for me, I'm from Kenya, him is from Libya, and he have the same statement. That's why we are here.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to put just a little, it is just an interesting opportunity. Unfortunately, I just have a few days to be back to my country. I came for a short holiday, and I just met her today, and we were having a chat, and she was like, I'm attending a human rights meeting. Can you join me? I said, oh yes, let me give it a try. And I get here. It's so amazing, considering the work I do as well in my country. I'm a journalist and a right advocate working on forest issues in my country, Liberia. I'm not sure if many of you may know about a very small country called Liberia, but with very huge forest potential, about 45% of the Upper Guinea forest, given the importance of the forest. And I've been really interested in understanding the possibility of people and forest, and to what extent they both are interrelated and interconnected to benefit from one another. In Liberia is, to a greater extent, very challenging. And because of time, I'm sure most of you are aware of the situation in many countries, in African countries. Liberia is not just unique to Liberia, where corporations are taking advantage of maybe the people test for development, and they are exploiting local communities, especially their natural inhabitants. The forest has been depleted, and to some extent, the government is also committing a huge portion of the forest as supposed to benefit the people, simply because she's more interested in quote-unquote what we call development. So it's a very tough battle in Liberia, and attending such a conversation and is really interested, and maybe I'm hoping to take some of this information back home, and to some extent, yes, we can have some of these conversations and we can exchange contact. Like I said, I run a popular radio advocacy talk show in my country, and it have honestly never been welcome from the initial stage, especially by the government and some powerful elites, because their thinking has been my mission was basically undermining their effort to accrue more profits and to maybe develop their pocket, to fatten their pocket. And later, they did really get some level of attraction from the European Union that is currently supporting my program to some extent, my institution, and as well as other international organizations. You mentioned Klein firm. There's an international organization working in Liberia, is also in the UK, firm. I'm sure some of you might know that firm, Global Witness, and other institutions have, to a great extent, been in partnership with the work, appreciating the work we do, because they are also frontline defenders. So yes, I really appreciate this conversation, but I just have one general question. If you are to make a specific recommendation, just one recommendation for immediate action, especially for the population, I don't want to limit that to Africa, but let's say to the growing population or countries, the growing economies that are really, really affected by the climate crisis. What could be that, just one recommendation, immediate recommendation, basically action-oriented recommendation, especially if we attend conferences, international conferences. I was at the COP. I was fortunate to attend the COP. That was my very first experience in the UK last year. And I know there was some development, there was some campaigns, and there was some commitments, and it has some level of good deeds. It also has some level of challenges from activists group, from government. But I'm also aware that many a times these conferences are held, but the trickle-down effect are not really experienced in countries back home. Government attend conferences and make some very huge commitments, big commitments, but it's not really, these commitments do not really go down or do not really affect the life of ordinary people. So what could be that just one practical action? So in fact, I'm just here for a couple of days. I will be back, and I'm hoping yet I could have similar conversation continuously. And what could be the message?
It's a really wonderful question. Thank you very much for asking it. I think, well, I'll open it up to all four of the panelists, if I may. And Zach, if I ask you to go first.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try not to speak for too long, because I'm aware I keep stealing answers. And first of all, I just want to say it's a privilege to be speaking to people from Kenya and Liberia in the audience, and in many ways you should be on this panel because we're talking about something that affects your countries deeply. So I just want to acknowledge that, first of all. I think I'll just answer your question directly, which is, you've both just done it, which is to take a microphone and to speak, particularly when you're in countries that aren't your own country, because I think that is powerful for this audience and the people hopefully watching at home, to hear people from your countries and what's going on, particularly around the forest. So I think to speak out, and then it's linked to that, I would say to organise. So I won't for a second pretend to be an expert in your countries. You know much more about it than I am, and I come from a very specific context. So I'm speaking to you as an amateur and a friend as opposed to an expert politician in this context. But I think to be able to organise your communities to find their power against these developers. Now, I'm not naive. I know when we talk about developers in London, we're talking about a big entity that's very difficult to tackle. I can only imagine how much more that is multiplied, and the power gap is multiplied in many countries around the world. So I acknowledge that the gap you're facing in taking these huge developments is huge when you maybe don't have the same access to political representation. But I think conversations and speaking out is, I know it sounds abstract, but I also think it's a very important thing that can be done and we can both continue to do. On that, I could see, did you have another question?
Yes, I have.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yes, we are a bit
Thank
pressed
you.
for time, so if we could keep it brief, that'd be wonderful.
I won't answer it, but you can ask it and these guys can answer it.
I have one question or one request, because especially back in our African countries, and especially in Kenya, most of the youths are willing to see a better change. As our speaker said, Lisa, that today the people or the generation that are today are the one who can take action. And for us, like for me, I've been approaching most of the government, not to show them that we are against what they are doing. First, we tell them the reality. Look, we have the tomorrow to live. We have to be better. Even if we are happy that today we are there, but tomorrow will be worse. So we are approaching some of this organization. But the government, like maybe my government, I'm open to say this, sometimes they tell us, yes, you have said this, but would you do it? Sometimes you have something good, but sometimes you have, maybe they need like also financial partnership support. So maybe we are willing, or I'm appealing, if you know an organization that is willing to do a mission outside, we have an NGO that is registered and we are willing to partner. Yes, please.
Speaking from a SIKH Human Rights Group perspective, we are always looking to collaborate with individuals and organisations around the globe. We are first and foremost an international organisation. Later on, my contact details will be displayed on the slide, so please take them down and we can collaborate in the future. And I'm sure that the panellists here today would also be willing to, or their representative organisations would also be willing to collaborate with you. I am aware that we are pressing on for time, so unfortunately I'm going to have to close the audience Q&A. But please be aware that our panellists are going to hang around at the end and we'll be able to answer your questions in more detail before we have a bit more time. So with that being said, panellists, I did have one final question for you, and that would be if you had one point or message that you'd like the audience to take away from today's discussion, what would that be? And Lisa, if I could ask you to go first.
I think my answer would be just speak up. You know, Greta Thunberg, no one is too small to make a difference. You're all important, you all have voices. Use them, speak up to your friends, to your families, to your MPs, to your councillors, to your political organisations, whichever groups it is with you that you're engaged with. Yeah, speak up.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Zach, can I pass over to you?
So I'm going to partly pass just to give the women more time, but that is my one action for the men, actually, that I think we can often give more space for women to speak, especially in these environmental discussions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Virginia, yeah, over to you.
Just to say, and perhaps an answer to your question, perhaps is to consider what position you currently have of power. You're a journalist. That's actually a powerful position. And what position you aspire to achieve so that you can use it to make a difference, whether as a student, as a family member, or as a political leader, whatever it is, or even as Lisa was saying, if you're an accountant, that's a really specific, useful skill to have. So just consider what you have and what special power you can use.
Thank you, and Serena.
Yeah, so my key message would be to recognise the power that we as young people have to make change in our own local communities, but also in the national and international communities. Things like tapping into all the various talent and creativity and innovative thinking, where we maybe have these novel ideas. When I was talking about how we're kind of like the babies, moving in parallel with the whole green revolution, which is also a baby, and then tapping into how everything is so, I don't know, just fresh and quite exciting. I mean, it's also very dark and brings a lot of dread, but just the amount of opportunity for us to pour in our passion and creativity and make a change, I think is actually can be very exciting.
Thank you very much. I'm aware we're going to run over slightly, but please bear with me just very quickly. If you are interested in the topics that we've been discussing today, you may want to find out more about the degree programme or undergraduate degree programme that's currently being run by University College London's Institute for Risk and Disaster Reduction. The Global Humanitarian Studies Bachelor of Science is a 3-year undergraduate degree that aims to educate and train future generations of humanitarian leaders in theory and practice of humanitarian action. The multidisciplinary programme will equip students with the knowledge, critical, analytical and research skills and core competencies grounded in practice to anticipate evolving and emerging humanitarian threats such as the impact of climate change and managing widening vulnerability and crisis response. This short video will explain the programme in a bit more detail. If I could ask you to.
Did you know that some 82 million people around the world were forcibly displaced by the end of 2020? Nearly 26 million of them are refugees living in different countries. We live in a world that is full of challenges to health, water and food, livelihoods, equality and so much more, including the COVID-19 pandemic. Not only do these challenges affect vulnerable communities around the world, but also intensify pre-existing crises such as conflicts, forced human displacement, ecosystem disruptions, social inequalities, and chronic poverty. Global climate change is making these things even worse. So the world must act, and act fast. The humanitarian sector is expanding and diversifying as various actors are seeking to save human lives and transform responses into prevention as part of global humanitarianism. The sector needs humanitarian workers with a diverse range of backgrounds. UCL Institute for Risk and Disaster Reduction, IRDR, runs a new BSc degree in Global Humanitarian Studies to educate and train future humanitarian leaders in the theory and practice of humanitarian action. In this multidisciplinary program, students will be able to examine world's responses to conflicts, disasters, climate crises, pandemics, and other emergencies using knowledge and research methods from a range of different disciplines. We aim to equip our students with the scientific knowledge, technological and analytical skills, and core competencies grounded in practice to anticipate evolving and emerging humanitarian threats. Governments, businesses, and humanitarian organizations have emphasized the need for skilled graduates, as well as in-depth subject-specific knowledge, students will develop a range of skills required for the humanitarian careers. These include qualitative and quantitative research techniques, strategic planning and project management, communications, networking, and presentation skills. We are looking for students from diverse backgrounds with varied interests, skills, and ambitions. We welcome students from all around the world who share our vision to reduce human sufferings from conflicts, disaster displacements, epidemics, and climate crisis.
I hope that short video has given you a bit of a slower introduction to what the SIKH Humanitarian Bachelor of Science is all about. If you are interested in finding out more, if you click onto the next slide, you can find out more
Did you
by
know
either scanning
that
the
some 82
QR
million
code,
people around
that will be displayed, the QR code is displayed on the screen, or alternatively you can find it on UCL's general website, the details which can be found below. I'd just quickly like to talk to you about a minute of how you can get involved with SIKH Human Rights Group. One of my environmental projects is entitled the COP26 Youth Engagement Initiative. I'm currently working with secondary school, sixth form and undergraduate students to implement their own environmental conservation projects in their local area or in the education institutions that they represent. That can be anything from tree planting to litter collecting on campus to organising your own environmental talks such as this. I very much help you from an administrative side of things, so how you get started, all the way through to helping you with the funding application. So as Lisa said, applying for small grant lottery fund applications, you can get anywhere from between £0 to £10,000 for local initiatives. They're very keen on this at the moment. So I can support you the whole way through, and obviously with tree planting, sourcing the tree saplings and so on. We also run SIKH Human Rights Group's work isn't just within the environmental field. We also run a women's empowerment series run by my colleague Bethan. We're looking to make some more to look into sustainable period products and having them free in educational establishment laboratories, businesses laboratories and so on. We also work with artificial intelligence, and as Jazdev said at the very beginning, I currently I'm involved in a UN working group for a binding legal instrument for transnational corporations and other business enterprises. So within the wider sphere of SIKH Human Rights Group's work, there is involvement opportunities at a local, regional and at an international level. You can help us prepare our written statements, especially within the environmental field. We are very open, or we've placed a lot of emphasis on the importance of generational collaboration between young persons and older persons. From SIKH Human Rights Group's perspectives, often older persons, in our opinion, they have the necessary resources, time and so on to amplify the voices of younger people, whilst obviously not ignoring those younger voices themselves. I'll leave it at that for now. I will hang around at the end, but if you do want to get hold of me, my contact information will be available on the screen. And for viewers who are looking to viewing us via the SIKH channel, please get in contact with me, and I'll be more than happy to discuss any proposals that you do have. So really, all I think is left to say is thank you so much, panellists, for taking the time out of what I know are very busy schedules to be with us today. I hope you, the audience, have enjoyed it as much as I have. And as I said, panellists and myself will be hanging around at the end if you do have any further questions that you'd like to ask. But once again, thank you very much for attending this event, and I really hope that you get home safely. And we'll leave it at that. Thank you.